Yeah, it is another episode of the Autumn Windbags. RJ Clifford, let's have some fun today. Back. Apologies for missing last week. 1,000 apologies. Got the old pinch nerve in the back. So if you see me like sitting like this with like real high posture, or if I keep like doing this, that's because my back's killing me. It's going into my neck, it's moving into my shoulder, it's going to the back. It's a mess back there. So apologies for missing last week. Not going to happen again. But playing injured, but I'm going to continue to play injured and deliver because that's what we do on the Autumn Windbags. All right. So yeah, back's hurting. So if you see me moving around weird, it's because of that. So a bunch of things to get to. The first one I get to is I just want to touch on the Dan Snyder thing. I know that Soto did a lot of that on Sunday, but there's a few things I want to add to that. So Dan Snyder may be on his way out as owner of the Washington Commanders. There may not be a shittier man in sports than Dan Snyder, for all the things that we all kind of know about, right? Toxic executive culture, allegations of inappropriate behavior involving his own cheerleaders, allegations that Snyder is like cooking the books. He has 2 separate books. There's profit sharing in the NFL. So you like try to find ways, there's certain things that individual teams make money on their own. There's other ways where individual teams put money into the league and then they kind of give back in. It's kind of a mixture of like capitalist, socialist type of setup, right? There's some profit share and there's some things that teams keep on their own. So the Commanders are being investigated by Congress, the Federal Trade Commission, and the Virginia Attorney General. Not 3 groups of people that you want knocking on your door. Okay. So the big part about this, how does it affect the Raiders, right? So it's been pretty abundantly clear that Roger Goodell and the NFL want Mark Davis gone, right? Mark Davis, unlike almost every single other owner in the NFL, isn't some super successful billionaire from doing something else and then bought an NFL team as this kind of like toy, right? He is a second-generation NFL owner. He inherited the team, and that's all he's known. He's never had a job in his life other than being owner of the Raiders, right? None. No job at all. That's it. Owner of the Raiders. And so they don't want a guy like that running a franchise in a new city, in a new market that could be giant moneymaker for them. They want a professional, billionaire, experienced businessman at the helm for the Raiders. And so they want Mark Davis out. Here's the difference. Snyder, the NFL is generally willing to look away for like allegations or problems of impropriety, right? You picked at some cheerleaders. As long as you're making money, we're fine. Oh, it's a toxic corporate culture. You're making money for the NFL. It's fine. Once they found out that they may have been cooking the books and screwing the NFL out of some dollars, that's when things get hairy. You can do almost anything in the NFL. And the NFL, if you're an NFL owner, you can do almost anything and they won't care except mess with their money. You can't do that. The NFL isn't the NBA, right? This isn't like Donald Sterling. Like they'll kick you. Like the NFL doesn't just like do what Twitter tells them. The NBA does. The NFL doesn't. For them, it's just about the money. So if they're now willing to move on getting rid of Dan Snyder, that opens up the door to getting rid of a Mark Davis. So forcing an NFL owner out of ownership, unprecedented move if that's what they're trying to do. So if they can start by getting Dan Snyder and get kind of the public behind it, right? Like, oh, he's a piece of shit. Oh, toxic culture. Oh, those poor cheerleaders. When really they're just getting rid of him because he's stealing money, essentially. Then that now opens the door and sets a precedent for being able to get rid of other owners like Mark Davis. So I'm going to follow this story. You all should be following this story closely because it could absolutely influence what happens with the silver and black. They can get rid of Dan Snyder, self-made bajillionaire. He's a piece of shit, but certainly a businessman that's been successful, right? If they can get rid of him, they can get rid of Mark Davis. So follow this, not just if they get rid of Snyder, but how they get rid of Snyder. All right. So one of my, honestly, the guy that I think is the smartest NFL mind at ESPN is Bill Barnwell. His articles are fantastic. I listen to his podcasts, follow him on Twitter. Absolutely brilliant guy when it comes to the NFL, especially for guys not, a former player, right? He's not like, a guy that played quarterback in the NFL for 10 years and now he's an analyst. He's a guy that's just film guy and a big numbers and stats guy. That's why I like him. Giant stats guy. And so when he says something, I listen. That doesn't mean I always agree. That doesn't mean he's always right. But as one of the smartest guys at the NFL or at ESPN for the NFL, when he talks, I listen. And he's one of the few guys that if he says something exactly opposite of what I feel, again, that doesn't mean I'm going to change my mind, but it makes me reconsider. Oh, I want to consider myself a pretty open-minded guy. So if a very smart person says, RJ, I think what you're saying is 100% wrong, you need to do a 180 and change your opinion, be like, okay, maybe I will, maybe I won't, but I'll explore your options. I'll explore what you had to say and I'll go from there. And so when he did a podcast this month, or I think it was just last week, on 5 over-unders for win totals for NFL teams. And one of them that he picked was the Raiders. And he picked the Raiders under 8.5 wins at minus 125. And so when he said that, I said, I thought for sure we better off than last season. Another 10-win season, another playoffs. We got we actually have a permanent coach now, unlike most of last season. Got Davante Adams. We got Chandler Jones. All our young guys are just going to be one season better. This roster improved. We have only every possible reason to be optimistic about next season. And yet Barnwell's saying he wants the under at 8.5. So he brought up 6 reasons why. Okay. And we're going to go over all through those 6, all those 6 reasons on why he thinks the Raiders are going to go under 8.5. He made some points. He's wrong about some things, but he also completely ignored one giant element, which I'll get to at the end. All right. So here is Bill Barnwell at the start of talking about the Raiders and why he's picking them at under 8.5.
I have an under on one of the teams you mentioned. It is the Las Vegas Raiders at 8.5 minus 125. And this is in part a bet against sort of they added Davante Adams and Chandler Jones. Like, yes, those are 2 good players. Sure, Davante Adams is a phenomenal wide receiver, but what if Davante Adams plays 12 games or 10 games? What if he's not, the guy he was with Aaron freaking Rodgers as his quarterback? Like, yes, he has a relationship with Derek Carr. Derek Carr is not Aaron Rodgers. Chandler Jones had 5 sacks in week 1 last year and was kind of anonymous the rest of this season. I think those are good additions.
All right. So let's start with with Davante Adams. When you start bringing up injury on a player without a lot of injury history, that means you're not using that information to make a decision. It's you've already made that decision and now you're looking for stuff to back it up. You know what I mean? The difference, right? Like when you've already made up your mind about something, you made an emotional decision, you're looking for things to validate what you said. That's what Barnwell's doing by bringing up injuries of Davante Adams. He's not an injury-prone player. That's not like a thing that's plagued him. He's certainly had a share of bumps and bruises, right? He's been in the league 9 seasons, 8 seasons, 7, 8 seasons. Like it's like some guys get hurt, some guys miss games, but that's not something that really plagues him. And it's not like he's like half through his 30s. Like he's young enough where worrying about injuries out of nowhere doesn't make sense. And he has no history of injury. And yet Barnwell brings up, well, what if he gets injured? It's like, well, then you can say that about every acquisition from every team ever. What if Russell Wilson gets injured? Oh, that's not going to work. What if Tom Brady gets injured? What if Justin Herbert gets injured? All right, if Davante Adams was a guy who gets hurt every single season and misses, 7 games every season, yes, we'd have that conversation. Be like, yeah, it's part of his history. It's part of what happens with him. If we would have brought up the injury with Josh Jacobs, like, yeah, I don't think Josh Jacobs is going to be a major factor next season. He always gets hurt. And be like, well, okay, can't argue with that. Josh Jacobs always gets hurt. He brought up the injury history of Jonathan Abram. Be like, yeah, Abram. 2 of 3 seasons, he's had a career-ending shoulder, season-ending shoulder surgery. Okay, I get it. But when you're saying Davante Adams, well, what if he gets injured? It's like, you could make that about anybody. Like that's a statement you can say about literally every player in the NFL. He's not an injury-prone guy, so that's null and void. 2, he's saying, what if he's not the same guy without Aaron Rodgers? Which got me thinking a little bit. It's like, okay, I think that's fair. Aaron Rodgers, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, and that's who he's had throwing to him his entire career. Great quarterbacks make receivers look amazing. That's a fact. I'm not going to fight that. But here's the other thing. Davante Adams isn't brought in to make Davante Adams look good. Davante Adams wasn't brought in to have Davante Adams break receiving records and break touchdown records. He was brought in to make the entire offense better and more successful. They have the Las Vegas Raiders this season will have more weapons than the Green Bay Packers ever had, at least under the Aaron Rodgers tenure. Darren Waller, top 3 tight end. Hunter Renfrow, top slot guy. Multiple time Pro Bowler running back in Josh Jacobs. 3-time Pro Bowler in Derek Carr. Yeah, maybe Davante Adams doesn't have the same numbers that he did with Aaron Rodgers and in Green Bay, but that's going to be because he's getting double teamed and other guys are open. I mean, if you have to cover Davante Adams, Darren Waller, and Hunter Renfrow, good freaking luck. And if you're able to cover those guys, that means you probably have 8 guys in coverage and we can run into the box, right? So yeah, does Davante Adams was forced to be the guy in Green Bay. The first, second, third, and fourth option in Green Bay. Because he was the only real target that they had. Now he's going to be one of 3 or 4 awesome targets in Las Vegas. So this idea, it's like, well, yeah, he had a better quarterback throwing to him. Yes, fair, right? Aaron Rodgers is better than Derek Carr, but now he's one of multiple options. So you're trading basically having not quite as good of a quarterback throwing to you. Instead, now you are one of many things that the defense has to worry about, as opposed to the only thing defenses have to worry about. And obviously, if there's any place you can be traded and any other quarterback they have throwing to him, he's going to want it to be Derek Carr because they have so much continuity together, right? So his first take, well, Davante Adams might get hurt. I don't know if it makes sense. I'm not buying it. All right, and here's Barnwell's second reason on why he thinks the Raiders will be under 8.5 wins this season.
A lot of concerns about this team. We don't know if Josh McDaniels is a good head coach. Last time we saw him as a head coach, he was a very bad head coach, I think it's fair to say, in Denver.
The Josh McDaniels element. Now, I'd even go so far as to say, not only have we seen Josh McDaniels be a terrible head coach, he's been a terrible offensive coordinator when not with New England. Everyone forgets about that one season when he was the offensive coordinator with the Rams. They were terrible offense, absolute trash offense. So this is a big part. So like, as we've said multiple times, like this is a pretty poignant point by Bill Barnwell. It was like his shortest point. This is the shortest clip that I pulled, and it was kind of like an afterthought for him. But this is the one I think that should be taken the most seriously. This is the one I think has the most juice behind it, is that we don't know what kind of head coach Josh McDaniels is going to be. I'm kind of in between Rory and Soto. Rory's like, he's terrible. He's awful. I hate this situation. Josh McDaniels sucks. This is the worst thing ever. Soto is like, oh, he's going to be awesome. He was amazing in New England. He's figured out his problems. That was 10 years ago when he was, however long it was back when he was in Denver. He's a changed man now. He's learned the errors of his ways, and he's going to be great. I'm in the middle. I hate being a fence sitter, but I'm cautiously optimistic. It's true that Josh McDaniels, as a head coach, has a history of being terrible. He's a terrible head coach. He was a GM as well, head coach and GM, which obviously as Raider fans, we know doesn't pan out that well all the time. He drafted Tim Tebow, and the Broncos were awful. Now, I do like what he said about his time as a head coach and in Denver and how he's going to be better. He said, look, I know football. I know X's and O's. I know stuff that goes on the whiteboard, and I know that type of stuff, but I just wasn't that good at handling people. I'm just not a people person type of coach. That hasn't been my strength. And I've been working on that for the last decade and a half, trying to be a better head coach as a man, as a leader, as a motivator, working with egos, working with different, multimillionaires, 22-year-old kids. I've gotten better at that. And I believe him. I think a guy that smart with millions of dollars on the line would figure out his errors. And so I think Barnwell makes a decent point here. We don't know what kind of head coach Josh McDaniels is. We truly don't know. And if anyone tells you what kind of head coach he is, they're either full of shit or they're trying to sell you something. We truly don't know. If he completely bombs, right? If our next 2 seasons, he's absolute trash, the team falls apart, no leadership, worst case scenario in Las Vegas, right? If that happens, there's going to be a lot of like, we should have saw this coming. No one should be absolutely shocked if Josh McDaniels is now a trash head coach in 2022. No one should be shocked because literally the only time he spent as a head coach, he was trash. Again, however, it was a long time ago. Smart guy. You work on your strengths, you work on your weaknesses, and you get better. It helps that he's with Dave Ziegler, a smart GM, that they know each other, they're friends, they can work together. Brought in a ton of his coaching staff, so it's going to feel a little easier on him, right? Surround himself by familiarity. And he's taken over a good team. How many head coaches do you have to take over after a 10-win playoff team? You get Davante Adams, a Pro Bowl quarterback, Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, Max Crosby. You picked up Chandler Jones, right? He has a lot going for him. But I will say this was Barnwell's strongest point. We don't know what we're going to get out of Josh McDaniels. Nobody does. We won't know until, honestly, halfway through the season. Well, we know, what kind of head coach Josh McDaniels is. Fair point, Barnwell. Let's move on. His number 3 reason on why Bill Barnwell is picking the Raiders to go under 8.5 wins next season.
This team was much worse than its record. Yes, they did go 10-7. Yes, they did make it to the postseason very narrowly over the Los Angeles Chargers. But this is a team that was 6-7 late in the year. And then they got a string of compromised quarterbacks. They got Nick Mullins of the Cleveland Browns in a game they won by 2 points. They got Drew Lock in the Broncos in a game they won by 4 points. They got COVID-afflicted Carson Wentz, where he came back moments before the game started in a game they won by 3 points. And then the Chargers game, I don't need to remind you how crazy that was. I think the Raiders were the better team in that game, but this was not a team that was on a postseason path. Not like they were heading in the right direction. They were floundering, and then they managed to stumble upon three just dismal quarterback situations.
Yeah, bad quarterback situations happen, especially late in seasons. And no one's thinking, look, you're talking about like the Browns, right? Oh, a rough COVID situation. The NFL broke their own rules to let the Browns have some of their COVID issues happen. Carson Wentz with Indy. He's not the difference maker in Indy. There's 7 Pro Bowlers on that team. It's not Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz is not the difference maker on that team. Brought up the Broncos. We own the Broncos. It's the one team in the division the Raiders own. And of course, we beat the Chargers straight up, fair and square, put our feet on their throat, squashed it down, Adam's apple exploding, kicked them out of the playoffs, and brought us in. Don't let anybody try to diminish that four-game win streak that the Raiders had at the end of last season. Don't let anyone try to diminish that. Oh, there were some COVID issues. Every team deals with COVID issues. And it's not like it was Justin Herbert getting COVID issues. It wasn't like Tom Brady getting COVID issues. It wasn't like Aaron Rodgers getting COVID issues. It wasn't these like superstar quarterbacks that if they're gone, the team's out. That wasn't any, like that. It wasn't those monumental, COVID replaced players during that 4-game win streak. Yeah, string of bad quarterbacks. We play strings of bad quarterbacks all the time. Next one.
Now they get a second place schedule. They get 8 home games instead of 9. They were 21st in DVOA last year. They were basically just behind another team I'm going to mention in a minute, but they were behind Seattle, well behind Seattle. They were behind the Browns. They were behind the Vikings. They were behind the Broncos without Russell Wilson. This was not a good team. And so I think the additions they made matter, but they're They're counteracted by what the Broncos did in adding Russell Wilson. They're going to be a much better team this year. I think the Chargers are going to be a much better team this year. And I think that the Chiefs are maybe not as good on paper as they were a year ago, but I think they're still way ahead of the Las Vegas Raiders, who they beat 48-9 and 41-14 a year ago.
So this is the second best element that Bill Barnwell brought up on why he's going under with the Raiders 8.5. It's true. It's a tougher schedule, right? We had 9 home games last season and technically 8 this season. Now we get 2 in LA, which are basically home games. Kind of feels like we're going to have 10 home games, but that's fair. You get now a second place schedule because, right, you have those 3 extra games. So, you have your 6 division games, and then you play 2 other divisions. That's another 8 games. And then 3 games are the shittiest teams play the other shitty teams from last season. The best teams play the other best teams from last season. We now have that as more difficult schedule. So, yeah, we're playing the NFC West. The AFC West is best division in football. And we have 3 tougher games. So that's fair. It is a tougher schedule than last season. It should be on paper a tougher schedule than last season. So that's fair. The division's much better. That's fair. And the DVOA that he brought up, how the Raiders were 21st, that's not an end-all, be-all stat. And I think that's why he kind of threw that all together. Schedule, division, DVOA. It's like, here's like 3 small things, but he's right. Like, he's right about the division and the schedule. Like, so that's fair. Again, I think that's the second best reason Barnwell gave for why he's going under on the Raiders next season. Schedule's going to be tougher. Okay. Fair enough. Not insurmountable type schedule that you can't handle. The schedule last season wasn't easy by any means. It was a tough schedule last season. It was a really tough schedule last season. This season, a little tougher, but not crazy. All right, reason number 5.
2 first-round picks in 2020, Henry Ruggs and Damon Arnett.
Yes, I mean, obviously.
The guy selected after them was Lynn Bowden Jr., who they traded before the draft ended, I believe.
Yes.
And then they just traded Brian Edwards, the other third-round pick from that class.
So that was Will Brinson, who was the co-host of the show with Bill on this podcast. And he brought up the bad drafting for the Raiders. Like, yeah, you don't got to remind Raiders fans that bad drafting happens in Las Vegas. But this is the thing. You can't use an excuse that's going to hurt next season when we already overcame that excuse this season. The Raiders have been drafting terrible for a while. This was a draft class this season, right? McDaniels and Ziegler's first one here in Las Vegas, that it was fine. But the Raiders have already overcome all that bad drafting. Yeah, Damon Arnett and Henry Ruggs, first rounders didn't play. We still went to the playoffs. Yeah, that 2019 draft class, not picking up any of those fifth-year options. They're all still on the team, and we still went to the playoffs last year with them. This team has overcome bad drafting. And that's, of course, not talking about all those great mid-rounders that we got last season and the one before. Yeah, Alex Leatherwood looked bad as a first-round pick, but everyone else, that was a really good draft class outside of the first pick. And again, they're not going to be good next season because they've drafted poorly the last few seasons. They went to the playoffs last season after drafting poorly. They've already overcome it. I don't like that. I don't like that reason at all. All right, here's his 6th and final reason for why Bill Barnwell is going under 8.5 wins for the Raiders next season. And it's, again, the most controversial player on the Raiders roster. It has been for almost a decade.
I don't think Derek Carr is the problem, but is Derek Carr going to be able to shoulder the sort of workload he has to shoulder to prop up some of the weak parts of this team? I think they're going to be good. I think they'll have some games where they look really impressive, but I would be surprised if they got to 9 wins.
So Derek Carr, you're saying, not the problem, but he's not going to be able to overcome the issues that the Raiders have. He sounds exactly like Soto. Saying, Derek Carr, he's just not good enough to overcome the issues that this team has and get them to the playoffs. What the fuck did he just do last season? He just overcame all the issues of last season and took this team to the playoffs. He's literally doing what everyone's saying he can't do. Derek Carr's not good enough to carry a bad team or a floundering team into the playoffs. He just did it last season. He literally just did it. A team with the coach that disappeared and massive mess. His number one receiver going out, an absolute tragedy. His all-pro tight end missing like 6 or 7 games. The defense, while better, wasn't great. It wasn't even good. It wasn't even average. It was a below average defense. Literally the only thing Derek Carr had going from him was good continuity in the locker room and special teams. That was it. That's all Derek Carr had going for him. Josh Jacobs, quiet season. He was forced to make Zay Jones a good wide receiver. He was forced to make Zay freaking Jones a go-to wide receiver. I constantly get this. Well, Derek Carr's not the problem. He's not terrible. He's not dragging the team down, but he needs everything around him to go perfectly if they're going to go to the playoffs. Nothing went right last season, and they went to the playoffs. And that's the big thing that's not brought up in all of Barnwell's excuses. Like all the 6 reasons Bill Barnwell brought up that's saying why he's going with the under is like, well, Adams and Jones, not that big of an addition. We don't know if McDaniels is going to be good. That run they went on last season, it was a string of bad quarterbacks. Their schedule, DVOA, division's better, bad drafting. And I don't think Derek Carr can overcome all the elements that the Raiders need to overcome. He never brought up the fact that last season was the biggest dumpster fire of a season in NFL history. John Gruden, Henry Ruggs, Waller injury, all those things we've talked about 1,000 times. He never brought that up. And so he's like, well, yeah, they had all this success last season, but I don't think it's sustainable. And this is where Bill Barnwell, being so smart and being so like stats and fact and data driven, can hurt him. Because he's saying, look, all these things that they accomplished last season, I don't think they can do it again this season because of reasons X, Y, and Z. If you don't look at the intangible element of having a dumpster fire of a season that the Raiders just had, quite literally one of the most tragedy-stricken seasons in NFL history, they overcame all of that and still went to the playoffs. Now, it's a better team. All of the young guys are a season older and better. We don't have any real old guys that are going to get worse. It's basically all young guys that are only going to get better every season. We actually have a head coach in place. We have a new GM in place that's doing a great job. Got a brand new star wide receiver, arguably the best wide receiver in football, who's already got synergy with the quarterback. Jacobs is going to be 1 year better. Renfro is going to be 1 year better. All our rookies from last season are going to be 1 year better. All the second-year players from last season are going to be 1 year better. And we don't have a dumpster fire, tragedy-stricken season. That is the biggest reason why the Raiders are going to go over 8.5 wins next season, because it's not going to be that dumpster fire tragedy that they had to overcome last season. How good would they have been last season if Henry Ruggs didn't get behind the wheel hammered and those emails about John Gruden didn't come out and Darren Waller didn't have this weird COVID back knee injury situation midway through the season? How good would this team be if that was the case last season? We'll never know. But I do know that it definitely didn't help. And to say that, well, they had all these, they overachieved last season. Fucking A right, they overachieved last season. You can't put it into the context of the other 31 teams because the 31 other teams did not have to deal with what the Raiders had to deal with last season. All right. Calm down, Clifford. Let's take some questions. Joe Luna, woke Goodell might just kick out Davis. Goodell needs to go as well. So talking about before how the NFL it's been leaked that maybe they're trying to get Dan Snyder out of there. I think woke Goodell is just a phony woke Goodell, right? Like what has he actually tangibly done that's resulted in any sort of like social justice of any kind? He does all the performative stuff and racism, written in the end zone and on the backs of the helmets. He hasn't actually done anything, right? So again, it's not about Goodell like tangibly doing actual change unless you're messing with his money, which is what Snyder's semi been accused of doing. Once the Snyder stuff about money came out, that's when the NFL made their move, not before. Gun nerd, Josh McDaniels does make me a bit nervous. He is very unproven as an overall leader of a team. The only thing we can actually throw a bone to JMacD is he brought Ziegler and others with him. Again, it's the most valid reason Bill Barnwell gave for why he's going with the under. We don't know what Josh McDaniels is. We don't. We know his X's and O's are good. We know he runs a good offense, but can he only run that great offense under the ecosystem of Robert Kraft, Bill Belichick, New England, and Tom Brady. That's a whole different ball of wax, right? You can look like a super genius when you're also surrounded by other super geniuses. Can you look like a super genius when the buck stops here, when it's all on you? Josh McDaniels has yet to prove that. Again, cautiously optimistic that he's learned from his mistakes. He's grown as a man. He knows that dealing with egos and dealing with players is a different animal. I'm cautiously optimistic he's figured it out and will be improved there. Like you mentioned, gun nerd, Ziegler helps with that as well. Shane Tolbert, our red zone offense should be much better under McDaniels. Yeah, our red zone offense will be better under anyone but Gruden. Derek Carr, of course, gets all the blame for all of our red zone issues. But he was a good red zone quarterback before Gruden. Like, he was a really good red zone quarterback before Gruden. Look at Derek Carr's red zone stats. Was it 5 seasons before Gruden got there, the 3-ish with Gruden here, and then now let's look how they are at the end of next season. And you're going to see he's like this, Gruden without Gruden. Mark my words. Red zone should be drastically improved next season. Guareb, asterisk. Everyone outside of the people who are associated with the Raiders just don't think Carr is that good. It's unbelievable how so-called intelligent evaluators never take the no wide receivers as a reason. Yeah. So there's multiple reasons why Derek Carr is constantly underestimated. One is like his record's atrocious. Like, it really is. He's played on some awful Raiders teams, some atrocious Raiders teams. He's never had a defense better than 20th. Every time we get a good star wide receiver for him, they get traded, right? 5 head coaches over the course of his career. And that makes his record look terrible. And I think people look at that, right? And also, I think just kind of his demeanor too. Like, he isn't a rah-rah guy. He doesn't give you great zingers. And he constantly blames himself, right? Have you ever seen Derek Carr stand at a podium post-game after a loss, distraught, near tears in his eyes, and say anything other than, I got to be better. I got to be better. I got to lead this team. It's my responsibility. I got to be better. Never blames the wide receiver, never blames the coach, never blames the defense. People see that and they're like, oh, yeah, Carr, he does need to be better. He's right. That is a good quality in a leader, but people look at it as a bad quality. Where did you get that awesome hat, RJ? He has to ask the wife. She bought it. Black on black. I've said it before on the show. I do television production for the UFC, and you have to wear what are called show blacks. You have to wear all black clothes because you want to be in the background and not be seen. So you can't wear any clothes with logos. But if I go black on black on black, I can rep the Raiders while I'm working UFC. And sometimes I get a little camera time here and there, depending on where I'm sitting in the broadcast. Bam. The Raiders get their love. Always thinking. Derek Carr is the next Kenny Snake Stabler. God, that'd be great. That'd be awesome. RJ, you're already looking for small excuses about the schedule. If the Raiders don't get a right tackle and another quarterback and linebacker, they will lose games, and the Raiders are using this for an excuse. We're not trying to bank excuses. That's not the goal. It's like, all right, let's come up with all the reasons that we can use as an excuse. It's let's make sure, what are our problems, and let's work on it. Yeah, there are some personnel issues, right? The line and DBs, pretty shallow. Now, it's not such a I forgot which website or which Redditor it was that did a poll of asked Raider fans, are you happy with this roster? Does this roster, there'll always be changes to the roster, right? It's constantly evolving. It's not a roster that's no roster set in stone. It's always evolving. But as far as making drastic changes to the roster, something like 60% of Raiders fans are like, no, we're more or less there. We've got a roster we can win with. And of course, every fan wants their team to have the best at every position. but with a salary cap, you just can't do that, right? It's just not possible. And so we're going to have some youth with our DBs and some youth and some question marks with our O-line. But I can make that. I can deal with that. Neither one of them are so terrible that it's this major issue. And again, I've mentioned about the O-line before. It feels like Josh McDaniels wants to go with a really, really young unit that can work together and build some cohesiveness and stay together. I got to get that stat. And of all things, it was Bill Barnwell who brought it up. And I don't remember the exact number, but it's something like in the last 20 years, only like 10 times has the starting 5 O-line in the first play of week 1 also played the last play of week 17. It's only happened like 10 times. And something like 8 of those times they went to the Super Bowl. Like that's how big it is of your O-line staying together. Because it's not just picking the 5 best linemen to be individual players on the line. It's a unit that has to work together more than any other. Like they have to work in tandem more than wide receiver quarterback, more than cornerback safety, more than long snapper holder kicker. Like the O-line has to know how each other work. And it's proven no more by that example I just gave. If they can stay together and stay healthy for an entire season, you have a huge advantage over everybody else. Huge advantage. And so obviously the younger you are, generally painting with broad strokes, the less likely you are to get injured. So I think what McDaniels and Ziegler are doing is like, let's create a core young O-line that can stay together for the next 7 years and have them just be one cohesive unit forever, or not, for as long as possible, as opposed to let's go out and spend huge on individual linemen, a 32-year-old, a 24-year-old, a 31-year-old, and then we'll rotate the 32-year-old next season, and then we'll get a younger guy. Like instead of just constantly plugging the O-line, let's just go with a young O-line, have basically every single position be up for grabs. Because that's kind of what we got, right? Other than left tackle, every position on the O-line is up for grabs. You got all these young guys, from the draft, from free agency, the, second, third, fourth year players that are already on the line and young, have them all fight for spots. May the best 5 guys win their job and stay there. I think that's what they're doing. Gawareb again. Maybe Carr and the Raiders are just visitors in the playoffs every 5 years or so. Maybe. I don't think look, they don't go to the playoffs on accident. When there's been continuity at head coach, the Raiders go places, right? Jack Del Rio in 2016. It was the 3rd year of John Gruden's tenure, right? And we'll never know if John Gruden finished the season, how good the team would be. But that was, it was Gruden's team that went to the playoffs last season. When there's been continuity at head coach, the Raiders have found success. Now, that doesn't bode well for McDaniel's situation because it's obviously a brand new system, brand new coach. But again, he's taken over a 10-win team. Raider John, what game this season do you think will change the narrative for this team and have people like this eat their words or pat themselves on the back? Great question, Raider John. Let's take a look at the schedule. And look, what are the odds? There's a schedule right there. All 17 games. It's still so weird to me how we're playing in the regular season 2 teams that we're playing in preseason. That's so weird. Hall of Fame game with the Jags, and then we've got the Pats the last preseason game, and was it week 15? So the game that can change the narrative for this team, it kind of depends what the narrative is first. So obviously it's a tough stretch to start, right? First 5 games at Chargers, home versus Cardinals, at Nashville, home versus Broncos, at Chiefs on primetime. I think that's the big one. The Chiefs before the bye. If the Raiders can be 2-2 or 3-1 heading into week 5 and beat the Chiefs on primetime, that would be huge. Now, it's not a loss. A loss to the Chiefs, I don't think changes the narrative as much as a win does. I think because, look, let's call a spade a spade. Chiefs have owned the Raiders for a while, right? They crushed us last season in the second game, right? If we could, so a win over the Chiefs means 5 times as much for us as a loss to the Chiefs means for them. So if we can be 3-2 or 4-1 off of a primetime win over the Chiefs going into the bye, I think that's the big narrative changer for the Raiders. Because last season, they finally proved that the narrative of the Raiders always falling apart late, they can overcome that. They had an amazing 4-game win streak to close out the regular season. They've overcome that narrative. And it makes it feel more and more like that problem wasn't like Raiders culture or Derek Carr or the franchise as a whole. It made it feel like it was more John Gruden, because we heard whispers of players saying like, yeah, Gruden, like, he's so impassioned about football that he thinks all of us are, and we get burnt out. Like he pushes guys so hard late in seasons, and guys get burnt out. It didn't happen last season because Gruden wasn't there doing that. So that was the big narrative for the Raiders for the longest time. So they fall apart late in seasons. They changed that narrative last season. Now it's just how good are the Raiders in general? How good are the 2022, 2023 Las Vegas Raiders? If they can get out of week 5, 3-2 or 5-1, or 3-2 or 4-1, that's a big one. That's a really, really big one for the Raiders. Also, when you're thinking, all right, let's do an experiment. The Raiders, the over-under's 8.5. What are the 9 games that the Raiders really should pull off? What are the 9 games to get over 8.5 that the Raiders need? I think the obvious ones are Jaguars, Texans, Steelers, Seahawks. I don't believe in the Saints. I think the Saints are going to fall apart. I think that we'll sweep the Broncos. I'm not a believer in Russell Wilson. I think that defense without Vic Fangio is not going to be anything special. And I think we'll split with the Chargers. So that's 8. We need one more game out of that 8 to really put us over the top, to get us to 9 and get that over 8.5. Maybe one of the Chiefs games. The Colts, I think, just can't find a way to get it together. Pats, their quarterback situation's rough. I think everything has to go perfect for that quarterback to find success. The Niners could fall apart late by week 17. It's a tough schedule. It's a really, really tough schedule. I think we're going to surprise some people, though. Like those are like the ones like I think they'll be able to get, but like if you stop the run against Nashville, win that game. Kyler Murray, all that drama. And they're not going to have DeAndre Hopkins. The Cardinals aren't going to have DeAndre Hopkins week 2 because he's got this six-week suspension. So that's great timing for us. Yeah. I think there's a really good middle ground where like I think right in the center of the season after the bye, Houston, New Orleans, Jacksonville, Indy, Denver, and Seattle. Like those are 6 super winnable games. After the bye, and let's say like the original scenario, like we beat the Chiefs, like those are 6 really winnable games in a row. 4 of them are on the road, but if I'm going to be on the road, I'd rather be on the road to, Seattle without a quarterback, Jacksonville and all their problems. Think that, the Saints are going to be not special next year. That could be a 6-game win streak right there in the middle of the season. And then things get real tough again, right? Chargers, Rams, Pats, Steelers should be a win. End the season with the Chiefs. A lot of working narratives next season, boys. Woohoo! Let's see here. Good narrative. Kyler Murray is not a good quarterback. Hot take. He's a playmaker at the quarterback position. There's a difference between someone who understands the position and someone who relies on their athletic ability. Well, he's still young enough where I don't think we know the exact version of Kyler Murray yet. But I think you're right. Like he leans on his athleticism a lot. And for a guy his size, it's a tough one. Like he's like my size, right? That's a tough position to be running around all the time and letting your legs do all the work, taking all that damage. It's a tough position to do. Murray doesn't read defenses. He doesn't make all throws on the field. Murray doesn't make consistently smart decisions. He's a guy that you can scheme around, right? Like if you can get a spy on him and force him to be a pocket passer and kind of force him to play within himself. Like he's someone I'm glad that Patrick Graham's gonna be able to scheme against. Like we've got some guys that can really hurt. Oh yeah. And Chandler Jones. Gonna hurt him too. Russell Wilson is another guy that's overrated. He was a 7-win quarterback with elite wide receiver talent. And I think he's starting to break down. I think we're going to find out next season if, again, just talked about Kyler Murray. Russell Wilson, again, small guy, not a type of build that you want running the ball all the time. He could easily be falling apart. What else? If this Raider team does not make it happen to a Super Bowl, then it's safe to say this organization will never see a Super Bowl. This is the best Raider team ever for talent. Well, that 2001-2002 Raider team was pretty insane. Rich Gannon, Jerry Rice, Tim Brown, Pro Bowlers all over the defense, NFL MVP at quarterback. Come on. This isn't the most talented Raider team ever. Not even close. St. Cal Grizzly Raider. Who wins a fight, RJ or Deuce Gruden? Oh, me. I'd knock Deuce Gruden silly. The key to being Deuce Gruden is just making a cardio thing, right? That much muscle mass, he's going to gas out. You got to get him running. You got to get him working. You got to get him moving. That's the key. He'll gas out. And once they're gassed out, that's when you pounce. But you can't get caught in a clinch with him. He's just like jacked out of his gourd. Like he'll just like hold me up like this. RJ, who do you think out of all our draft picks will have the biggest impact on the team this coming up season? I pick is Zeus. Good question. And it is like an interesting one because with no first or second round pick, you're kind of like, ugh. You know, like there's no like obvious choice. I think it's got to be an O lineman because that's your biggest chance to get a lot of playing time, right? I think it's going to be an O lineman. I think we'll get a rookie starter out of this crew. Because again, if you're a rookie versus like a third or fourth year player and it's kind of close, right? Like if you're like, man, our rookie and pick a rookie and then like say Andre James or something. If it's close, I think they're going to go rookie because again, you want to develop a guy. You want like, hey, if we get a cheap rookie to take over this spot, like we've got that spot locked for several years and we pay him less. Right. So I think, yeah, if there's like a tie at a position in a position battle, they're going to go with the younger guy. Zeus will gas in 20 to 30 seconds. Yeah. That's the key. There was a good little conversation that I'll get to here in a second. I was asked the other day, rank the AFC West coaches, head coaches in the AFC West. And I think you go with Andy Reid, number one, and then it's just kind of weird from there, right? I said before, I don't believe in Staley. I think he's a media darling that people love him because he's right. He's all about the metrics and he says all the right things. And when the John Gruden emails came out, he went on this big diatribe like, oh, I'm so offended. This is outrageous. Let me clutch my pearls and just tell you this is unacceptable behavior. I can't believe anyone even say something like that. Oh my goodness. Oh my delicate imposition. I can't, my constitution is shook at the very core of someone being so mean in emails. He says that kind of bullshit, right? So like the media loves him. But I'm glad that they do because when he like sucks, he's going to get some extra opportunities as a head coach. Like they're not going to try to fire him right away because like the media loves him so much, which is great for us because he's going to be the head coach longer than he deserves to be, right? Don't believe in Staley. Who knows what's going to happen in Denver, right? And then you got Josh McDaniels, who, like I said earlier, his rare time as a head coach was awful. And that's what I'm saying. Like when we talk about this division, like, yeah, it's the best division in football. It just got better offensively and defensively, right? Offensively, Russell Wilson and Davante Adams, and then, Khalil Mack and Chandler Jones and Joey Bosa. Like, you got all these great players coming into it. It's which head coach can take that core and take it somewhere. Like, the talent's there. Like, the talent has been with the LA Chargers for a while. Their coaches can't get it together. They're the Chargers. Like, they just find a way to flounder talent. That's how they've been my entire life. Talent that's floundered. Denver, what can their defense do shit without Fangio? I don't think so. And then Raiders, is Josh McDaniels good or not? So, like, and then it's the other problem with Kansas City, right? Like, they were the only team, like, they're the team with a stable quarterback, stable head coach, stable ownership, but they had to cut a bunch of guys because of cap reasons. So while as the other three teams in the AFC West, Las Vegas, LA, and Denver, they're not, like, they don't have a history of success, but they've added a lot of talent that kind of brings them up. The Chiefs are opposite. They have a history of success, won the division 6 times, Super Bowl, but they had to cut a bunch of talent to stay under the cap. So we're all kind of like meeting in the middle, right? Now it's a matter of, can Andy Reid keep the offense as high-powered as it is without Tyreek Hill? Can the defense still hang on while losing all those good guys because of salary cap? Can he do that better than the Chargers, Raiders, and Broncos, adding new weapons, adding better rosters, but the coaching situation still isn't figured out yet? The AFC West is tough, but it's still, I don't think up in the air is fair. I think the Chiefs should be the favorites, and, Broncos or Raiders, somewhere along the bottom as far as like betting lines go. But there's massive question marks with all 4 teams. Massive question marks. There's not a lot of stability there at the AFC West. A lot of talent, a lot of like glimmers. Obviously the best quarterback division in the history of football. Has there ever been a division where like the fourth best quarterback is a 3-time Pro Bowler and just went to the playoffs? I don't know. Guareb, if this Raider team played the 2001 Raider team, you're saying 2001 wins. I don't think you're wrong. Well, look, football's gotten so much better in the last 20 years, right? Like, you got to use the context of the time. The 2001 Raider team, for its time, was the most talented, unbelievably talented. But the game has changed so much. The rules have changed so much. The athleticism has raised. Just like the quality of athlete that goes into the NFL is higher now than ever because the NFL has been king for so long. I mean, in my lifetime, it wasn't that the very best athletes played football. Some of the very best athletes played baseball. Some of the very best athletes did like Olympic sports. Some of the very best athletes did boxing in the 80s, right? Only recently has like the best athletes in America generally played football because athleticism goes further, I think, in football than any other sport. So you can't compare like the time frames like that. It doesn't jive, if you will. All right. Had a great time. I'm going to get out of here. We'll talk more about the AFC West coaches on our main show tomorrow with Soto. Talk a little bit more about the roster. I'm very curious what Soto makes of all of Bill Barnwell's comments on why he thinks the Raiders are going to go less than 8.5 wins. He's betting the under at -125. So he's paying an extra $25 to get that under. So we'll do all that as well. And until then, knock on wood if you're with me.